Seahawks fans, wherever you may be. Thanks for listening to the show. Join your hosts, Bill Alvstad and Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football. Hey, hi, Seahawks fans. Welcome back to another episode of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with co-host Keith Myers here to talk Seahawks football. Going to do a draft preview show for you today, accumulating all of the things that we've talked about over the last few months since this season ended, leading up to this weekend's 2024 NFL draft starting on Thursday night with the first round. Chicago's on the clock shortly after 5 p.m. Pacific, and Seattle will select sometime in about 2 hours after that, I would imagine, if everyone uses all their time before they select. So it's a long process, long night. It's fun. I enjoy it. It's kind of intriguing to finally see what all we've been talking about, where these players kind of land and fall and rate as far as the big board is concerned. How many hits do we have? How many misses? All that kind of stuff. It's just a fun night. It's a fun way to get started for what amounts to a long weekend all the way through early Saturday afternoon for the Seahawks. And you end up, somewhere between 6 and 10 players to talk about on Sunday. So welcome in, Keith.
Yeah. So I was thinking about it. You said that. I'm like, it's 150 minutes, which is 2.5 hours if everyone uses their time, which most teams use almost every second they have for reasons that aren't quite clear.
I think it has to do with commercials. It's like, the first 4 or 5 picks in the draft, they usually go commercial free. It's about 40 minutes. And then all of a sudden they start doing commercials. And pretty soon teams are on the clock. And, if you pay attention, if there's certain people in the room there that are on Twitter that will call out picks prior to the selection being made on the NFL network, which kind of gets a little squirrely and I don't really try to pay attention to that because it kind of ruins it. But the draft soon lags behind a little bit because of those commercials. And yeah, it's,
true, but I'm just talking about like the teams themselves take the entire 10 minutes. Like the Bears start out not the first overpick. They know who they're going to take. There's no debate. There's no anything. They know who they're going to take, and yet they will sit there for 9 minutes and 45 seconds before they make their pick.
Yeah, but whose instruction is that on? Is that actually Chicago, or is that the NFL Network producers saying we want time so that we can talk and set this thing up and all that kind of stuff? So I'm just saying there's a little bit of both.
It's not like the draft coverage didn't start an hour before that.
It's true. It's very true. But, most fans, I would say most, like more than 50%, will probably tune in right at 5 o'clock. I mean, it's a work day on a Thursday night. People are just getting home, transitioning. It's draft. You start the clock at 5 o'clock or shortly thereafter, and so I would imagine most people aren't pre-gaming. There's some draft nuts will take the day off and just kind of spend the first 2 or 3 hours prior to the draft listening to all that kind of stuff. But I'm one of those guys who probably end up turning the TV on at 5 o'clock. I've listened to enough where I don't need to go in there and listen to it again right before the draft. I'm pretty well set on all that kind of stuff. How about you? What's your plan?
I probably won't. I won't do any of the pregame stuff. I'll have it on. I probably won't be paying that close of attention for the first hour, just because Seattle doesn't have a pick.
We barely even talked to the top 10 about the top 10 players, really.
Yeah, and so I won't. I won't be looking for that, and we'll just see kind of what happens.
I guess I'll have to text you when Seattle moves up to 3 overall.
Yeah, you should do that. Which was actually one of the questions I was going to ask you about later. But yeah. So, all right. So in this draft, it's pretty much a done deal that Caleb Williams is going number one overall to the
Seemingly.
Bears. What do you think the probability is that those reports are wrong?
There's always a chance. Like I was talking about with you prior to pushing record, Caleb Williams has been sitting at the top of that board since last fall, and probably even prior to that, and really did nothing in the season to dissuade people. Although I thought he struggled in a few different games, but really at the end of the day, the tape is what it is, and it shows him at the top of the class, I think. And I would be shocked if he did not go to Chicago number one overall. I would think that, Schefter and some of the other guys out there, insiders, would have some sort of a inkling that movement is taking place. And I haven't heard anything at all about that, whether it be Jaden Daniels moving up to the top or Drake May or somebody else, JJ McCarthy. I don't think so. I think it's going to be Caleb Williams. I'm like 90%, 93%. There's always that little chance that somebody either moves up, gives them a ransom of picks and maybe a player to get that away from them to select a player, or they've moved off of Caleb Williams for some reason. Maybe that the team and the agent aren't able. It doesn't look like they're going to be able to work together for some reason. We've seen that in the past. I don't see any indication of that
ended
with him.
2 CBAs ago when you had the
true,
the slotting scale. Like it's just not a.
It's not a huge thing, but I'm telling you, Caleb Williams, I think initial reports were that his dad was going to get involved and he was not going to declare, for the NFL draft if it looked like he was going to go to a team that he didn't really want to play for. I'm just saying there's just a little tinge of that, not an overwhelming amount of information like that out there. But I fully expect Caleb Williams to be the number one pick in Chicago, be the team. How about you? I mean, do you see any weird sort of movement at all in the top 10 that would shock you?
Honestly, there would be some stuff. If you have, really with the quarterbacks, if you have a guy that's other than the top 3 go in the top 3 picks, right? If McCarthy, Penix, or Nix end up in those top 3 picks, I'll be shocked. Absolutely. After that, no, there really isn't.
It wouldn't shock me if like somebody moved up to grab Marvin Harrison, and maybe one of the quarterbacks went 4, 5, 6 that were originally supposed to go in the top 3. Something like that might be.
Oh, true. But I meant one of the other quarterbacks.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. I've heard, JJ McCarthy moving up again in different circles, maybe even jumping Jaden Daniels in the process. I honestly think if you really break it down, if Jaden Daniels was like 10 pounds heavier, Keith, there's a chance that Jaden Daniels would be the first pick in this draft. He's that dynamic. He's, you go watch the tape. You really go watch the tape. He's so dynamic in the way that he challenges defense and
go watch the tape and not his highlight reel.
Oh, I know. I get it. I've done that actually. I've done that.
If
I've watched entire games with him.
If you go and watch the highlight reel, you will think he is better than Caleb Williams because he has those plays.
He does. He has those plays. He doesn't have a lot of bad plays, Keith. So when you go look at him and you look at his miss rate, like turnover worthy plays, he's got like 13 in like 700s, not 700 snaps, like 400 passing snaps. He's a good decision maker. He doesn't want to run first like he's made out to be. He really does go through his check down and processes. If he's forced out of the pocket, he has an equal chance of looking for a player to throw the ball to as opposed to just taking off. When he does take off, though, Keith, he's a dynamic force to be reckoned with for any defense. Just really stresses defenses out in that way when they do design runs and all that kind of stuff. He's he's really amazing. Now, I wouldn't compare him to the kid in Baltimore, Jackson, necessarily. I think that Jaden Daniels is actually a much better passer than
No, see, I don't
Lamar
agree with that
Jackson.
at all.
I
No,
do.
I don't agree with any of that.
Hold on. Now think about the way
he's not a
Lamar
bad
Jackson
passer.
came out of college and went to the NFL. He really struggled the first year. Now I know that he had the MVP thing and Rookie of the Year kind of stuff going on, but he wasn't an accomplished passer until maybe just recently. In fact, even after his ACL, I think he was kind of forced to really redefine his passing game, and I think it really helped him be a better passer. Jaden Daniels is already at that level right now, Keith. I'm serious.
No, he's not.
Yes, he is.
He's not.
Yes, he is, Keith.
Yeah. He is a very dynamic athlete who does a lot of good things well, but he misses guys by a lot more often than an NFL quarterback should. He's
very accurate.
Very mind-boggling decisions at times. And
I could say that about Drake May, but not about Jaden Daniels so much, Keith. I'm disagreeing with you.
No, Jaden Daniels is not the passer that you're making him out to be.
He's the best deep passer in this draft, other than Michael Penix. But yeah. So when you go look at the advanced stats for Jaden Daniels, his yards per attempt, his completion percentage on passes over 20 yards, he's leading the league.
Who was he throwing to? He was throwing to two guys that'll both be first-round picks.
Well, at least he got them the ball. He did get them the ball.
Yeah, he got them the ball, and oftentimes they had to stop and wait for it, or it was off target, and they ran and got. They made him look good. I'm not saying he's bad. He's a good player, and he is deserving of going number 3 overall, I think. But he is far from an NFL ready product. He's a guy that's going to win a lot with his legs, and you hope he can develop as a passer. He doesn't have the arm that Lamar Jackson does. He certainly isn't as accurate. But he also is better at going through reads. It's just, it's not a great comp with the two of them. I think it's just athletic quarterbacks.
I don't think it's a comp. I don't think it's a good comp either. I really don't.
But yeah, Daniels is a guy that is a human highlight reel. But his tape, when you're not watching highlights, is not as clean as you're making it sound. It's not even close.
It's not close to Caleb Williams as far as how accomplished Caleb Williams looks on tape.
Yeah, but you're saying that Caleb Williams didn't have, had some bad games.
He did have
Caleb Williams' bad games were better than Jaden Daniels' best games.
No, Keith, come on. That's rough. That's a tough statement. You're going to get crucified on our
Crucify me. I don't care.
Yeah, I just think that you're wrong on that. I think that Jaden Daniels' best games are really as good as anybody in this draft. And
Jaden Daniels' best games came when he had zero pressure on him because he played behind one of the best offensive lines in football, and he had 2 of the top 5 receivers in all of college football to throw the ball to.
That is true. Both those things are true. But Caleb Williams also had a good offensive line. Drake May did not.
Caleb Williams had a great offensive line when he won
J.J. McCarthy had a great offensive line as well.
Last year, Caleb Williams did not have a good offensive line, and that's part of the reason why he struggled. He also didn't have a lot of talent to throw to, and that's part of the reason why he struggled. Drake May never had an offensive line at any stage in his career, and he never had receivers that were better than the guys that were covering him.
Yeah.
He was throwing off, out of off his spot and on the run and around unblocked guys on every pass play, and is as accomplished a passer, actually more so, than Jaden Daniels, and did so without any of the talent around him.
I think that Drake May is definitely the better overall passer with touch, with accuracy, with arm strength than Jaden Daniels. I agree with all of those things. I just think that Jaden Daniels is right there in that conversation. I don't think that he's so far below. I don't think that Jaden Daniels is going 3 or 4 overall in this draft just because he's athletic and he gives you a dynamic equation when it relates to being able to take off and run with the football. I think Jaden Daniels is there because he's a good football player and he's a good quarterback, and including being able to throw the ball. He's toolsy. He's got the tools. I think certainly, Keith, I think any one of these quarterbacks is going to need some time and a little bit of refinement in a NFL pro style offense. Drake May is maybe the closest. Caleb Williams second. To be ready to go right out of the gate. Jaden Daniels probably down there a little bit. I think even J.J. McCarthy is probably ahead of Jaden Daniels as far as being able to be ready-made, come in and play right away. But Jaden Daniels, I don't think is that far away. I really don't. I think he's going to be a great quarterback.
He's got a higher ceiling than McCarthy by far.
I agree.
I think McCarthy's ceiling is a lot lower than people are implying in the draft media. I think he's going to be a good player, but I don't think he's going to be a great player.
It'll be really interesting to see where J.J. McCarthy goes for me. There's so much talk about him going in the top 6 or 7. It would not surprise me if this is a kid that really kind of gets drafted in the 20s, and Michael Penix Jr. goes earlier. Yeah. I agree. We've been conditioned so much to see McCarthy go earlier and Penix to be falling anywhere between, pick 12 to pick 35. I mean, it's kind of crazy the swing that Michael Penix has, depending on how you value his skill set versus his age and injury history. But if you take those things out of the equation, Michael Penix is probably the second pick overall in this draft.
Yeah. I would agree with that. I think he is. I don't know. You take those things out of the picture. Caleb Williams has a lot of the hype because of where he played, who he played for, and all of that. But Penix, if you take all of the injury and age and that kind of stuff out of the equation, is an elite prospect, right up there with Caleb Williams. Maybe they're 1A and 1B, right? They're both right there. I think I would probably I like Penix in that situation because I think he's he's bigger and he's I like the size that he has and some of the other things that he brings, and I think that's a thing. But
that's why I think like you and I both selected Penix in our mock drafts most recently, and there's a reason for that. And I think we probably both of us, you got him at the back end of the first, I got him in around the 40 range. The reality is that if he's there when Seattle's on the clock at 16, I think they take him. To be completely honest. And if he's there at Las Vegas's pick, I think they may move up for a guy like him, because if his medicals check out, I think he's like any other player, and his age, I don't believe is going to be a factor, especially if you take a look at his skill set and in our offense with his ex-head coach. He could come in right away and compete to start. And if you're going to pick him, if you're going to take him at 10 or 12 or even 16, there's a likelihood that we have seen the last of Geno Smith, and Geno would be shipped out on day 2 of the draft for a pick or 2 or a future, because it would be Michael Penix's team.
Yeah.
So I think there's a chance that happens in this draft. I mean, they've done their homework on quarterbacks, and they know him better than any of the other quarterbacks in this draft.
If you're New England at 3, do you take a quarterback or do you trade back?
what do you got?
That
What do you,
roster is trash.
yeah. And so they may be, you got to start somewhere. I mean, maybe they do take advantage of their position and get the guy that they really want to go forward with. Mayo's their coach now. They could definitely draft a guy and release or trade, currently what they've got. That wouldn't surprise me. But at the same time, they need so many other things as well. They could take advantage of that spot in that draft and trade back and pick up a lot and really kind of reset their roster.
Lot. Yeah, because someone want to move up in front of Arizona to get Marvin Harrison Jr. Or you've got like the Giants who want to jump up and get a quarterback, or Atlanta that wants to jump up and get a quarterback. The Jets, perhaps Minnesota, Denver, Vegas, Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of teams that would love to get up into that range to get one of those top three guys. And
potentially, the cost is steep. The cost to move up to number 3 overall in this draft is going to be 2 future firsts and a third at a minimum, and that's moving in from, say, Seattle's range. Mm-hmm. If you're coming out further than that, Atlanta, it's going to be even more.
If you're Atlanta and you're at 8, right, you trade this year's first and next year's first to go up and get Jaden Daniels to plug in as your starting quarterback. I'd do that and I don't look back. And if you're New England, right, so now you're sitting at 8, you can still get a blue chip, like offensive lineman, the best guard in the draft type of thing. Maybe you move down again and still get one of the elite, sorry, I said guard, I meant tackle. You get one of the elite tackles in the draft. Maybe you move down again and still get an elite tackle. And then you build your roster around what you'll need eventually as a quarterback. And without a quarterback, you're not winning a lot this year anyway. If they win more than 4 games this next year with the way the roster is, I'll be surprised. And so they're going to be right back in position next year to draft a quarterback, and they will do so to a team that's got some pieces instead of a completely empty roster. Because I wouldn't wish the Josh Fields treatment on any of these guys, because that's kind of what it would be like if you are one of these guys going to New England.
So let's talk about Seattle a little bit here now. We had a good conversation about quarterbacks. We probably didn't talk about quarterbacks enough. It would go to figure that Seattle will go jump up and get one or move slightly to grab one that's fallen a little bit that they had high on their board. So that wouldn't shock me at all. What Seattle did prior to the draft, though, to kind of set up their roster with new coach Mike McDaniel. John Schneider's been around the block here. He's done this process a lot, but Mike's new to this process. They essentially traded away a couple of picks this year to get Leonard Williams a second pick. That's why we don't have one. And Sam Howell cost us one of our 4th round picks. And so you can kind of add those guys to the draft in a way. Leonard Williams, defensive tackle, 2nd round pick, equivalent. Sam Howell, 4th rounder. That helps me a little bit as far as the total value of our picks is concerned, because we go from pick 116 overall to pick 381. There's a huge gulf of time there. If they don't move, if they stick and pick at 16 and they stick it at 381, what does that tell you about their approach this year, Keith?
I think what that tells me about their approach this year is that they're waiting a year. They're kicking this can down the road because they've got so much dead money sitting there because of all these awful contracts, and they don't mind. Like they chose to take all of the cap hit this year rather than spreading it out. And if they stick and pick at 16, that means they're getting a guy that they believe is worth it to do so. And if they do that
probably best player available. Yeah.
or more so. Like they're doing that to get Penix, knowing that this is not going to be a good team overall. They're not going to be as competitive as we'd like, and they're really just gearing up for next year. I have a hard time viewing it any other way, because if they kept all that dead money, they were unable to go and sign some of the better free agents that really fit what they wanted to do because they didn't have cap space because they used it all up on Jamal Adams's dead money. And then they don't trade down and try and fill out the roster with talent. They just pick a player. Like, right. To me, that sounds like you're punting on 2024.
It does a little bit. My expectation is this team competes, and that means compete at every spot in the draft, and that means trading back a little bit. Now, that all goes out the window if a player is there that they just cannot leave the draft without. And I'm okay with that. But they need to figure out a way to work the rest of the draft. Like, they just can't stick at 381 and then 4-102 and 4-118. They need to use those picks and maybe a future pick or maybe a player to get back up into a spot in the draft or two spots where they can come away with like 2 or 3 players in the top 100 on day 2. That would impact this roster, impact games in 2024, not just 2025. Impact games this year. Go out and try to win this year, be competitive. They can't do that with the current picks. I don't want to overrate the draft as far as getting players that impact your roster right away. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes there's injuries. Sometimes it takes a year for a player. I'm hoping that first pick, that 16 pick, or if we drop back a couple, 4 or 5, that player is going to come in and have an impact on the roster. But I don't want to count on the draft to be able to win this year. But if we're going to win or do anything this year, we're going to have to hit on like 3 or 4 picks.
Yeah.
And I don't know that you can do that if you stay pat.
You're not doing that with one player at 16. You're not. And this is a roster that needs help. It does. And so
we're nowhere close to San Francisco.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm measuring. That's my measuring stick. How do we match up against San Francisco? Where are we in the trenches against San Francisco? Where are we at quarterback against San Francisco? We lag in all 3 of those areas. And now a new coaching staff. So it's like we're at a deficit before we've even started yet.
Agreed.
So we've talked about a lot of players in the last 3 months, Keith. Who's your favorite player that you would really go to war with in Seattle's war room to beat the drum to get that player in Seattle?
Wow. That is a good question. I try and keep myself open and not get sold on any one guy, but if he fell, Drake May. I think that's
how far would he have to fall before you'd be willing to go get him?
Probably after Denver at 12.
So not at 9 at Chicago's second pick.
No, you're giving up too much. But as far as guys that'll be there when Seattle picks at 16 or if they pick at 21 or that kind of stuff.
How much is too much for a franchise quarterback? How much is too much?
Is too much? Yeah, that's a good point.
You'd have to give up this year's first and probably next year's first to move from 16 to 9 or close to it, maybe a second, or a couple picks out of this draft. It would be costly, no doubt.
I would trade 16, 118 and next year's first to move up. If it was if it was moving up for a guy like Drake May, I would do it.
Interesting.
As far as like guys that are, it's more realistic that Seattle's going to be in play for. Guys, I really like. I mean, there's a Trevonde Sweat like aspect to it because of just the lack of nose tackles both on Seattle's roster and in this draft. But I'm not taking him at 16. I'm not taking him at 40. If I'm moving up, it's to get him, it's going to be from 81 into the low 60 or high 60s. Something like that. I'm not I'm not jumping that far. Yeah.
So I would bang the drum for Joy Fontenot because he's such a clean prospect.
He's a really clean prospect. He's a guy that I thought of answering this question with.
It's the obvious answer, Keith, and I thought about it for a second. It's like, well, do I want to say something that everyone already knows? But it's true in the sense that it's the perfect fit. You've got his offensive line coach now in Seattle. You've got his ex-head coach. You've got a position of need at left tackle currently, and potentially Charles Cross or Abe Lucas doesn't work out at tackle for you long term. You've got a replacement on the roster then at that point. The guy's a tireless worker. He likes to put people on their back. He's physical. He's just as good in the run game as he is in the pass game. I like him as probably a left tackle in this draft, especially after the combine when he measured close to 34-inch arms. And with his athletic traits and his feet and his mental capacity, his attitude, I think he's probably the surest bet in the top 15 picks in this draft, and I would
as
be
a guy who's
thrilled.
I mean, if he was 6'6", he would probably be the first tackle off the board.
That's the hard part, Keith. It's not his arm length; it's his height.
Yep. If he was 6'6", he'd be the first tackle off the board, but he's 6'4". That's not going to stop him from being a good tackle, but it also adds the versatility of letting him play guard. And so I think that you take him because he can start at 4 positions for you, if you need him to. Obviously not all at once for those of you listening. Bad jokes.
That would be amazing though.
But he could step in and he could be your starter at either tackle or either guard. You're going to give him the left guard job going into camp. And if Abe Lucas's knee is hurt, okay, he's your starting right tackle. If Charles Cross goes down, okay, now Fontenot is your starting left tackle. You take your pick, right? He could literally be anyone on that line and probably be, if not your best, your second best lineman. So I would have zero problem with them grabbing Fontenot.
There's a few players that Seattle had on their 30 visit, and of course talked at the Combine, the Senior Bowl, etc. One of those players is Malaki Corley, the wide receiver out of Western Kentucky, and which I've come to really like in this draft. But he's going to end up going somewhere in the from pick number 45-ish to pick number 60, I think, in this draft. Seattle has met with a number of players that are on almost universally looked at as being day 2 picks, and a lot of them are second round picks, and we don't even have a second round pick. Why do you think that is? Does that give you an idea or a clue at all that John Schneider's plan A is to move down in this draft, accumulate picks, and try to get into that area, or B, maybe there's a chance that some of these players fall and is available in the third round, late third round for Seattle.
I think both of those are thing. I fully expect him to move down. He's I don't see him staying. And
I don't either. It just seems like the easiest way to come out of the draft with your best options. But they need trade partners.
Yeah, so I mean, you do need trade partners, but someone's got to want to move up. But I see enough players dropping into that range where people are going to want to go up and get a Byron Murphy or one of the tackles or one of the wide receivers or a Jared Verse, one of those guys.
One of the corners. Yeah.
So
I agree. I think Seattle's in a really good spot at 16 to where they can kind of dictate the middle of the draft, middle of the first round. Like that's kind of a pivot point where players that are drafting in the 20s or even out of the draft, you have a second pick and or 2 picks in the second round, want to move up, and give up, a couple picks in the second round to move up. And Seattle would move all the way out of
round.
I think somebody does. Who was it?
The Commanders have 36 and 40.
Yes, that's maybe the team that I was thinking about, where you trade 36 and 40, and you get pick 16.
You're going to need more than that. They're going to have to also give up like 67 or.
Well, that'd be nice. I'd take that. But would you move all the way out of the first round to pick up 3 top 100 picks?
I might.
And the first one being in the early 30s.
I might, because you're looking at really even distribution of talent from 16 down to 40.
It's true.
And you're still gonna get a good player.
And you're likely going to get a guy that you had a first round grade drop out of the first round and be available there in the early second.
Yeah.
Interesting. So this show is kind of free ranging. We're just going to have conversation and whatnot. But is there anything that you want to talk about as far as team needs? What you'd like to see that as far as the type of players that Seattle has coming out of this draft, or at certain position groups where
I was going to say, other than offensive line, is there one position that you will be kind of upset if the Seahawks don't?
Did you say offensive line?
Besides the offensive line.
Yeah. That's a great question. Honestly, there's a couple of positions really that I think we're vulnerable at. None of our wide receivers are under contract past 2025, except for Jackson Smith and Jigba. That's something to keep in mind. Tyler Lockett might retire after 2024. DQ Metcalf's going to want a second extension next offseason. That's going to be pretty expensive.
When they signed him to that deal, it was to get him, from his point of view, he was going to get a bunch of money, but also get to free agency again.
Yes.
Before he gets old, so that way he can get another big payday.
So wide receiver is kind of an underappreciated need in this draft, I think. It on paper we're set in 2024, but in the future we're not so good. Linebackers, seems like we're set this year, but beyond our starters, we have nothing. So Terrell Dodson, Jerome Baker. Dodson's more of a true middle linebacker, kind of running stuff guy. Jerome Baker's more of a sideline to sideline, drop back in coverage kind of a player. They're both on 1-year deals. Behind that, we have Patrick O'Connell, Drake Thomas, and John Radigan. This is not a great linebacker draft, Keith, and you and I have talked about that and done mocks, and there's a couple players, but if you miss on those couple players in the first 2 or 3 rounds, you're looking at maybe not even starter material in this draft. You're looking at guys that are kind of rotational level players. So that might be an area that we could be surprised at. And the team maybe move off of 81 to go up and get a guy like Edgerrin Cooper or Colson.
Junior Colston
from Michigan. That could be interesting. You take a look at the safety situation. We've got Rashawn Jenkins and Julian Love. They're both on in 1-year deals essentially. Contracts are up after 2024. We've drafted after Cam Chancellor and Earl Thomas have left the team. We've drafted Mark Legree, Winston Guy, Eric Pinkins, Ryan Murphy, Lano Hill, Tedrick Thompson, Mike Tyson, Marquise Blair, and Jarek Reed. That's not a list that's going to win you too many championships from that position, right? So I'm thinking safety is definitely going to be an area where Seattle is going to draft a player in this draft. I don't know where, but it would shock me if we didn't. Just because I think the cupboard's a little bit bare behind the two starter level guys. And they probably would want a guy to at least be ready to go next year out of this class. Cornerback is interesting. Corners under contract through 2025, Reek Woolen and Devin Witherspoon. So after this year, Trey Brown, Mike Jackson, Artie Burns, all on expiring contracts. We're set right now, but if there's an injury or you're trying to look forward into the future, it'd be nice to get a guy. And you're really good this year. But you're also set and beyond. Tight end that beyond where we're at tight end currently with Noah Fant. We really don't have anything. No, Farrell Brown is temporary at best. And beyond that, we don't have any starting level experience on this roster. So tight end is going to be a position I think that they're definitely going to draft, probably in the 4th round, if I had my guess. Quarterback's an interesting one, but I would be fine going into the season with Geno Smith and Sam Howell. I think the team is too, but just in case, I think they're ready to draft if they're in a prime position to go get a guy. So we'll see. But as far as just having to draft, it's got to be offensive guard. I know you said beyond guards, but I've mentioned them damn near every position group on the team as an answer. And it really does come back to interior offensive line and maybe even defensive tackle. They really do need to spend some draft capital on those positions.
Yeah, for me, it's that interior, the defensive line, and then the other one is linebacker. I really don't like the middle linebacker depth chart right now. I like the guys they signed, but they need.
If they have an injury, Keith, they don't have anything.
Yeah,
I just don't know. I mean, you can address the linebacker spot up through training camp, if you have to get a guy, just a guy that can come in and play. But if you're going to really want to improve the position, it wouldn't surprise me if that's our second pick overall is a linebacker to get one of the guys. Either Jeremiah Trotter or Edgerrin Cooper's dropped a little bit or whatever, or there's a guy out there that they value more, Trevin Wallace or somebody else to come in and play. I can't remember the other kid's name that's quite high on a number of lists, but he's got kind of an injury history. Peyton Wilson, I think, is the guy I was thinking about. He could definitely be on their radar if his medicals check out. They really like
he's got some serious speed and athleticism. And the knee is scary, though, with him. But yeah, I mean, that's an interesting.
So what do you think so we don't have any plans to come back and record during the draft. I think we're going to let the draft fall. The only way that we'd come back and do a show, I think we talked about this, is if something crazy happens in the first round and we move up, or if we move up drastically in the second round to go get a player that's fallen out of the first or something, we'd come back and talk about it. But otherwise, I think we're going to come back after the draft's over and talk about our haul. What do you think is going to be the headline?
I think the headline's going to be Seahawks move back, fix their offensive line. I think they're going to move off 16 to like 20, get a guy like Fentano, or if he's not there, Powers Johnson, and yeah, I
really
honestly
close.
think that's what they're going to do.
I'm really close to you, but I'm opposite side of the ball. Mine's drafting a defensive lineman and fixing their defense first. If you take a look at the way the draft is for me, and it might be for you too, it really is a struggle to find good defensive linemen in this draft in the first 2 or 3 rounds. And there's a couple sitting there in the draft in the first round. I think Seattle might have access to Byron Murphy. We've talked about that. Chop Robinson, maybe Dallas Turner, falls to them or whatever.
Yeah, but those are edge players. Those are outside linebackers.
I understand that. Well, not Byron Murphy. Byron Murphy's
no, but the other two,
right?
The other two are outside linebackers.
And Newton's up there, and so I think that if Fontenot and Byron Murphy were on the table for you at 16, I would have a really hard time passing on Byron Murphy, just the way that he impacts the defense. But I agree. I think I agree with you. I think that you'd end up taking the better player, the better
Seahawks also paid for a guy, like paid a lot for a guy that plays the same position as Byron Murphy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, Dre Jones and Leonard Williams kind of both play that.
Well, Dre Jones is more of a 5 and Leonard Williams is a 3, ideally. And I think
and they kind of go back and forth though too.
Yeah,
as would Byron Murphy. I mean, Byron Murphy's only 397 as well, or 297.
Yeah, he's a 3. And I think you just paid a lot of money for Leonard Williams.
You could really fix your offensive line, Keith.
Yeah.
If you drafted an offensive line
is Byron Murphy a really good player that I'd love to have? Absolutely. But Fontenot just makes everything on the offensive line so much simpler. That's a lot of talent to stick in there next to Charles Cross. And if anyone gets hurt at either tackle spot.
It wouldn't shock me if they move up to where Las Vegas is at and choose Troy Fontenot. And I wouldn't.
Yeah, I could see that too.
Now, it cost us. We'd have to figure that out. But if you're going to go get a player, get the safest thing in the draft. I'm okay with that. I think that's the headline for me. Seattle plays it safe. Seattle plays it safe, chooses best player available on their board, type of a draft, same that they've done the last 2 or 3 years as far as overdrafting and drafting players of need and all that kind of stuff. I think those days are over. I think they really try to allow the draft to come to them, but they do move around a little bit to kind of go get their guy. If that's what they want to do, if there's a guy at 70 and they're 81 and they have to expend some draft capital to go up and get somebody, but they leave the draft with that guy, I'm okay with that. So anyway, anything else? Otherwise, I'll see you at the end of the draft.
Yeah, like I'm so excited for draft week. Like, let's go do this.
Yeah.
Come on, Seahawks, let's go get some players.
some real bodies we can start talking about and plugging them in. That'd be good. All right, let's get out of here. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Find us on Twitter. Keith's at Myers NFL. You can find me at NW Seahawk. The show is Seahawks Playbook Podcast, your favorite podcast platform, and YouTube. Hit the subscribe button, share it, leave us a great comment. We'll talk to you online. So until next time, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook Podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NW Seahawk, Keith is at Myers NFL, and the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.